Hello everyone, and welcome! This is a new podcast that I've been thinking of doing for a while, in addition to the podcast that I'm currently the co-host on, the Pencast with Penken. This is a little bit different. This is a podcast that I'm going to be doing with my good friend Eagle.
Hello!
Those of you who listen to the Pencast will recognize him. He's been a lovely guest. He's been in several episodes so far.
Thank you.
And this is a new show that we're calling Animation Rotation. The premise of this show is that me and Eagle, who both love old cartoons, we binge them all the time.
Cartoons, animation, all of it.
Yeah, cartoons, animation, American, international, whatever. And we thought it might be fun to, we're always watching these shows anyway. We're always chatting amongst ourselves. We thought it might be fun to sort of do that in a podcast format. So the way the show's going to work is that both of us are going to pick one show that we're going to watch a season of, one episode at a time. But so that we're not just doing, one show for however many episodes, we're going to swap between two of them. Thus the name, Animation Rotation. So I thought it would be fun to do the Twisted Tales of Felix the Cat, which is a delightfully underrated show from the 90s. It's a revival of the classic Felix the Cat character.
Extremely delightful. It's really good.
And Eagle decided, which is what we're going to be covering next episode, to watch through the first season of Code Lyoko. So look forward to that in episode 2.
Yes. Yes.
Which I had not watched since I was, probably like 14, 15.
Since Babby Vorp.
Yeah, since I was a wee bab watching Magoozy on Cartoon Network after school. So it was interesting having those memories rush back, 10, 12-year-old memories, like, oh, I remember this music. They play this music in like every episode.
This music's a banger. Whoa.
But we'll get to that in the next episode. But for now, we're going to be talking about the first episode of the Twisted Tales of Felix, which is Guardian Idiot, Space-Time Twister, and Don't String Me Along. They kind of do that, 3 7-minute segments, all roughly the length of like a, classic theatrical short, which is definitely what they're going for.
Absolutely.
Especially with these early episodes of the Twisted Tales of Felix, you can really tell they're going for like a modern take on like classic rubber hose animated cartoons, and I absolutely love it.
They do a great job. Basically, those first episodes were just all visual effects, but like, ooh, it's really good.
Yeah, that's because I had mostly been exposed to like the later episodes in the series, which were, much more character driven, I guess. There was a lot more dialogue. But with these early episodes, the interesting thing is that there's very little dialogue, especially coming from Felix himself. Felix really does act like, a classic rubber hose cartoon character. He speaks very little, and most of the humor comes from like funny visual gags.
And I've never personally seen the show. You said that you've had memories of this show. I've never seen it before.
Yes, I caught like a small handful of episodes way, way, way back in the day. I think it was on Cartoon Network, but I saw very little of it. Mm-hmm. And then I kind of rediscovered it when I saw a DVD of it at my local video rental store. Like, man, remember those?
Ooh.
Rest in peace. But no, it was actually the only DVD that had come out of the show in America. And it was just like, 5 random episodes. And I watched this and I'm like, oh, this is delightful. I love this. Why does no one ever talk about this show? But as it turns out, there was a German DVD release that has the complete series and has every single episode in English, but with, German text, which is a little weird watching an English episode, but all the title cards are all in German, but whatever.
It works.
So, Eagle, what were your, having never sat through an episode of this show, what were your thoughts on it? I
was under the impression when we first watched it that it was going to be more like, I had seen the original Felix the Cat cartoon from like the 30s, 40s. I don't remember when it was from, but it was on Netflix, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had seen that a little bit, and a lot of that was also kind of visual gags and visual effects. But I feel like this show that we had just watched, it absolutely has like one-upped it. It's absolutely a lot funnier to watch, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely.
The only thing that confused me at first, but it's not that hard to get used to, Felix's voice was a lot different than the old cartoons.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. So, Felix the Cat's gone through a ton of different incarnations over the years. Like, obviously, he was originally a silent cartoon character. But then He was revived in, I think, the 50s by Joe Oriolo.
Mm-hmm.
And his incarnation of the character, he made like a whole cast of backing characters like the Professor and Poindexter. And he gave Felix a voice, and his voice was like just obviously knockoff Mickey Mouse.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the voice most people associate with the character because of those 50s cartoons. But with this, which I really kind of appreciate, is that they decided to go in a totally different direction. You know, instead of being, oh, it's me, Felix, oh! He's kind of like this. He's kind of got like a Liza, like, kind of raspy voice.
He goes from being a Mickey Mouse to a Bugs Bunny.
Yeah, exactly. The first segment of this first episode is called Guardian Idiot, and I love the way it begins. Like, the very first shot of the very first episode of this show is this sociopathic butcher, I think he was voiced by Jim Cummings, just singing about how much he loves meat and like gleefully shoving pigs and cows through the grinder to make sausages and beef patties. It's anarchic, it's fucked up, and it's delightful.
And then he walks into his freezer, to which he realizes, oh, no meat.
So he wanders outside, and our plucky protagonist, Felix the Cat, is playing a guitar, trying to get some change to buy a meal. This guy sees that, he decides to take advantage of Felix's predicament, and he invites him in for, quote-unquote, a meal.
Oh, he makes him a meal, all right.
Oh, yes, he does intend to make him a meal. And he ties him up and puts him on one of those Dick Dastardly, Snidely Whiplash contraptions where he's slowly growing closer to a meat grinder, and Felix cries for help.
So meanwhile, in heaven, there is a guardian angel trying to get his wings, and his first assignment is to help Felix the Cat.
I love this guardian angel's design, by the way. He still just has his training wings, so he just has these little dinky angel wings that are just attached to his ass cheeks.
He comes on down, and he's like, I'm your guardian angel. Tell me where you want to go. And Felix is like, take me on a cruise. Get me out of here. And the guardian angel, he fumbles a little bit, but right before Felix can get ground up, he gets taken onto a boat. But not a cruise. A skeleton pirate ship at the bottom of the ocean.
Yes, he gets transported to a sunken ship, and I love how, despite this entire sequence taking place underwater, they don't animate it as though they're underwater. They kind of animate it like SpongeBob, where the characters just kind of act like they're on land, like they still walk around and talk. Which, I don't know, it's just that old cartoon logic. Because that's exactly what they do if it were like, a 30s cartoon, like, oh, this episode Felix is underwater. He would just walk around on the bottom of the sea.
Exactly.
He has a battle with a bunch of skeleton pirates. Oh! I forgot to mention one of the best visual gags from that intro sequence. It just came to me. Was when the Jim Cummings butcher is singing his psychotic little song. You see a woman and I guess her husband are eating...
I thought it was her son.
Her son, yes.
They're eating hamburgers.
And this woman gets so into her hamburger.
She eats the hamburgers, and then she eats her plate, and then she eats her son's hamburgers, and then she eats her son.
Yup. And it's just happening in the background while this dude's singing his song. And, like, they're almost off the screen by the time she eats her son. It's such a blink and you'll miss it gag, and I love it. So, yeah, Felix is underwater. He fights off the skeleton pirates.
They tell him, ye will walk the plank. And he's like, haha, yeah. And then he just walked off the plank.
And one thing I love about the design of Felix in this cartoon, and I think this might be something that came from the old black and white shorts, is that when Felix opens his mouth real wide, he has little fangs, but they're not fangs. They're like white silhouettes, like extensions of his white muzzle.
Like when people draw Toriel, for example.
Exactly. It's such a distinctive and interesting way to draw a character with fangs. I really like it. But he finds the guardian angel, who's also just chilling out at the bottom of the sea, and he says, what are you doing? Take me back on dry land. And he's like, okay, I'll take you to dry land. And he zaps him, and he's on dry land, all right. He's in the middle of a fucking desert.
Also, I have to say, you did that voice very well.
Yo, I'm a wacky guardian angel. So Felix is in the desert now, and you get all the standard desert tropes. There are vultures looming over him. He starts hallucinating, but they do it in a really fun way where, like, he hallucinates that there's a casino. It's like a, casino hotel thing. I think they even call it, like, the Delirium Hotel. And he just wanders in and he starts having a grand old time.
Just playing a game of craps.
And these two buxom cat ladies start, like, fighting over him. And then the hallucination wanes and he realizes that, oh, no, it's actually the vultures fighting over him, trying to make him a meal.
Everyone wants to make a meal out of Felix.
So then he tells the vultures to fuck off, and he wanders through the desert. There was another weird gag in the desert where, like, it starts snowing out of nowhere. And then he sees that there's this house, and there's just, like, snow just immediately around this house. And there's an old man in a rocking chair. And what was it that he said?
I'm in my own world.
I'm in my own world. And Felix just kind of shrugs and continues walking. There's so many just weird out-of-nowhere gags like that throughout this show. It's just so delightfully bizarre and anarchic. That's a good way to describe this show, anarchic.
Yeah. So continuing on, he goes from the desert then to... I don't even remember where.
I think after the desert, he just says, I want you to just take me back where I was. And he says, oh, okay. And he takes him back to the meat grinder, except he's still tied up on the meat grinder.
Mm-hmm. And Felix just kind of gives up at this point. He's checked out. When the butcher notices, hey, this angel's here, this fairy's here, grant me a wish.
Mm-hmm.
Duh, okay. You mean it? Make me the biggest sausage I've ever seen. And thus he makes him a sausage.
Yeah, he makes him a sausage. He magics him into the meat grinder, and he gets ground up off screen, mercifully. They did have the decency to not show this full-grown man, getting brutally ground up into sausage meat. But you hear it off screen, and there's a really nasty, like, sound effect while it's happening. And then he comes out just as a sausage, but still, like, with his face and everything. And he's just like, oh, well, I guess I should have expected that. And then he just kind of, Daffy Duck, woohoo, woohoo, woohoo's off screen. So Felix thanks the guardian angel for saving his bacon. And the guardian angel says, oh, I've finally fulfilled my goal. I've been a good guardian angel.
I finally earned my wings.
Mm-hmm. And then you see, like, a poof of magic. And then his little tiny ass wings get replaced with, like...
jet engine wings.
Like, fully to scale jet engine wings. And he just kind of flies off, oh, farewell, Felix. Don't do anything I do. and then Felix the cat just kind of looks to the camera and he pulls out a hamburger and he just, I'm going to chomp into this. And then it irises in and that's the end of the first short.
Hey.
And, like, what a way to begin a series.
To immediately show the viewer, hey, whatever happens in the beginning kind of doesn't matter. The middle can be whatever the animators feel they want.
Yes, that's what I love about it, is that the first act, I guess you could call it, of this short has no bearing on the rest of the short at all until, like, at the very end they decide to bring it back for, like, a funny payoff. That's something that happens a lot in this show, honestly, is that I'm almost remiss to compare it to this, but it's almost like an episode of Family Guy, where in Family Guy, the conflict they introduce at the beginning of the episode does not matter. It's just they introduce some weird story beat in order to have the characters suddenly stumble upon, hey, a horse! I've always wanted a horse! And then the episode is just about the horse.
Peter, you can't have a horse in the living room.
The first act has no bearing, intentionally so, on the rest of the episode. It's just sort of there to give a loose justification for all the weird, visual gags and things that are to come. I would give Guardian Idiot, I'd give that like a solid 7. I thought it was really entertaining. The middle of it was a little bit like it didn't really have anything to do with anything, which isn't a bad thing necessarily. But I thought the very beginning and the very end with the butcher were really funny.
Mm-hmm.
I think that definitely elevated the episode. I'd give that like a solid 7. What about you?
I'd probably give that one a 6. Like, It was very entertaining. There were some parts of it that were like, I needed a minute to be like, oh yeah, this is Felix now. But like, it was literally just the transitioning from me being more used to the professor and the magic bag and all this stuff, and then like Felix is just kind of his own thing in this. The professor will show up in later episodes. Oh. Yeah, they do bring back some of the characters from the 60s cartoons. So the next short is Space Time Twister, which was like... the first episode kind of like leans you into like, the crazy surrealist visual gags. And then the second episode just like... Goes all out in just the surreal anarchy. So what we were talking about, how the first episode kind of introduced the beginning doesn't matter, and then the rest of it goes. This episode plays it very hard. The beginning does not matter. Absolutely. It's introduced as like, oh, Felix the Cat's, going on the subway.
and he gets on the wrong car because a sneaky little mouse changed the 6 to a 9. And then Felix wanders on this, and it's like, oh, it's awfully dead in here. And there's just like skeletons and cobwebs and everything. And it's just like this train car from hell. And then the lights go out. He pulls out a match, and there's a little mouse, the same sneaky mouse from the start, I guess. And the mouse blows it out, and he lights it up again. And suddenly there's just like a wall of mice just staring him down.
He's like, jeepers, I gotta get out of here.
So Felix bails from the train car. He's just on the tracks. The train car goes off to whatever hellish destination it was bound for. And the train car never comes up again. Again, it's the first act does not matter. It has no bearing on anything that's to come.
Felix falls at some point through a hole?
Yes, I can only assume it's meant to be like an Alice in Wonderland pastiche. Like he wanders on, he finds like a talking door, and the door's like, oh, I'm locked, you can't come in here. And, Felix the cat, he has a bright idea. Because, he's an ink-blotty cartoon character. He just kind of turns into a puddle of ink and just, like, melts beneath the door and reforms on the other side. And then, again, kind of with the Alice in Wonderland motif, he starts falling down this big, weird, surreal hole and just keeps falling and falling. And there's a sign that says, now entering the center of the earth.
So he falls. He enters the center of the earth where he finds what was his name?
What was his name? It was, the Twister.
The Twister?
And he's this, like, presumably godlike figure who just lives in the center of the earth, who makes sure that, like, all of space and time stays in place and doesn't, start ripping apart at the seams.
He hasn't had a nap in millennia. He takes out his magic box and takes a snooze, which Felix says, and takes the magic box.
In the most, 30s cartoony way possible. Like, his arm just kind of stretches over to the box, he grabs it, and then he just shrinks his arm back.
So he starts playing with the box, and the box is like, what are you doing?
Yeah, the box just comes to life, because, of course, everything in the show is alive, and it starts, like, telling him off. And Felix is so shocked that he just drops the box on the ground.
Oh, now you've done it.
Now you've done it! And it just starts, like, sparking, and everything, just all of reality starts going haywire.
Felix starts evolving backwards.
Yes, he starts, like, devolving into, like, progressively simpler, like, prehistoric creatures. And it's difficult to even, like, summarize the rest of this episode because it's really just increasingly, like, bizarre visual gags. Until, like the last episode, until at the very end they decide to bring back the conflict from the beginning to wrap it up.
Except not even from the beginning. The subway never comes back. It's the Twister who comes back.
Mm-hmm. So the bulk of this episode from here on out is just Felix, devolving into more and more basic creatures, going throughout prehistory, just encountering strange beings. Like, he turns into, like, a dinosaur, and then he turns into, like, a weird fish thing, and then he turns into an amoeba. And it eventually culminates with, there's this one really good visual gag where he's just, like, he's got, like, a really big bloated head for a scene, and he's just in the middle of this black void, and there are a bunch of, like, weird creatures with upside-down heads who start, like, closing in on him, and he just kind of stares at them, and then he just pulls his own, big bloated head off, flips it upside down, and reattaches it, and just kind of stares them back.
It's kind of like, I'm one of you.
Mm-hmm. But then the heads, like, start, like, unfolding, and they turn into, like, flying eyeballs.
And then they all merge into one big eyeball, like the one boss in Terraria.
Yep. And this whole sequence eventually culminates with Felix, telling the time box, take me back, get that guy back so we can fix everything. And, the time box is like, oh, so now you want him back. You thought you were so clever taking me, but now you want his help, huh? And then the Twister just sort of rips open just a hole in the animation, and he just sort of steps in the frame, and he says, oh, you thought you were so clever taking that box, but I'm here now, and I'll put things back. He takes the box,
kicks Felix out, shuts the wall, and Felix is like, wait a minute. He rips open the animation himself and finds everyone just kind of having a little dance party.
Yep, the Twister and the box and some of the weird creatures we've seen are just kind of shucking and jiving in this blue void.
And Felix is like, if you can't beat him, join him. And starts having a little jig himself.
And then that's how the episode ends.
And then da-da-da-da-da-da. It's done.
It's like, again, the actual specifics of the narrative do not matter. It's just an excuse to have, like, weird visual gags, and I kind of love that. I'd probably give that, I don't know, 5 or 6, thereabouts.
A 5 sounds about fair.
Yeah, probably a 5. If 5 is what we're going to consider, complete middle of the road. Not that it was a bad episode by any means. It was really entertaining, and there were some really inventive, visual gags, but there wasn't much of anything actually happening. It was just kind of in service of, having Felix morph into weird things. But he was entertaining.
Yeah.
You're kind of feeling around the same?
Yeah, I'm feeling the same. A 5 sounds very fair. It was an entertaining episode in its own right, but at the same time, it wasn't as entertaining as some of the others that we had watched.
Absolutely.
And then the last one's probably the closest we're going to get to, like, some semblance of a story.
Kinda, sorta. But again, it's just sort of there to, service the visuals. The final short of this first episode was Don't String Me Along. It starts off with Felix coming home after a long day of whatever Felix does. And there's just a talking vacuum cleaner voiced by Charles Adler, who's just doing his red guy voice from Cow and Chicken. And he's like, "Oh, Felix, you leave me to clean up your messes, and I'm so fed up with this. Do you have any idea how taxing this is on me?" And so the vacuum gives him an ultimatum. He's going to leave, and he's not going to come back unless Felix cleans up these messes himself.
So Felix looks at the mess and says, "Well, where to begin?" And he notices a stray hair.
I love how you called it. He notices this stringy hair, like, on
his coat hanger.
His coat hanger. And you immediately said, "Is that Jimmy's outline?" And it's like, well, yeah. Okay, you just called the rest of the episode.
Exactly.
The rest of the episode is Felix unraveling an outline that just keeps getting progressively bigger and bigger and bigger until he just starts unraveling, like, the entire world.
It's the one visual gag from Ed, Edd n Eddy, but a whole episode of it.
And it's really good. I love the way they, like, visually communicate the outline coming undone. It must have been really interesting to animate because it's like, obviously he pulls away the outline and then all that's left is the colors, and then like the Ed, Edd n Eddy gag, the colors just kind of splort onto the ground like water. But it's just so interesting because you can imagine what the cell for that must look like, because the color cell is going to be the same for all these shots, but it's only the outline that's changing. And how often do animators even get a chance to do that?
It's interesting, too, because, like, a lot of those elements that he pulled apart didn't super look like cells, Yeah, some of them might have been painted. And that's really interesting.
That's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. I mean, they probably switch it. I'm pretty sure what they did was they have the painting, and then once they like, draw the outline on a separate cell, and then the painting is underneath. And then on the frame where it's supposed to splotch out, they just replace the painting with a cell.
Probably, yeah.
But, like, it's a very, very interesting look. And they pulled it off very, very well.
And so, yeah, the rest of the episode is just kind of Felix having, like, at first he starts unraveling the outline around all the junk in his house. And then once the house is clean, Felix isn't just going to stop. He keeps going. And then the entire house just kind of falls apart.
The entire house into the floor. But he's still not done.
He just keeps going. He just starts, like, unraveling the entire town. Like, he unravels his apartment complex, and then there's just, like, a woman taking a bath, and that's all that's left. And she just kind of looked down at him, fresh! And then, I love what happens next. There's, like, a bunch of animate buildings who just kind of look into him, and he's like, "I cannot believe what I just saw with my own 2 windows!" And they kind of creep in on him. He's like, "Hey, bub.
You ever been to a bad neighborhood?"
And Felix's response is just, "Oh, I'm just going to take your outlines." So he takes their outlines, and then they all splort to the ground. And then all that's left is a bunch of ladies bathing in a bunch of bathtubs in each building.
After that, that's when there's the lady and her baby crossing the street.
Yes. At this point, the outline kind of, like, comes to life. The outline that he's been unraveling this whole time. Like, he turns it into a horse, and then he rides the horse around. And then the outline turns into a finger and starts pointing him in a direction. Felix looks in that direction, and he sees a lady and her baby who are, crossing the street. And there's this enormous, like, pickup truck just, like, barreling their way, driven by a blue whale with a cigar.
And as the truck approaches, the baby is the only one to notice and takes out their will and testament and starts giving their belongings to... I believe there was one that said he would give his binky to his blanket.
And one of them was like, I bequeath to my fa-fa. And some of the gags in this show are really dark. But Felix gets in just in the nick of time, and he starts unraveling the outline of the car. But instead of the car just kind of going splort, it shrinks down into a little tiny car. But then it kind of bumps against the baby harmlessly. But then it fucking eats the baby and the mom.
The hood opens up like a jaw and swallows both of them. And Felix is like, oh god, opens up the door, and like 17 clowns come out.
Mm-hmm. And then the whale comes out, also dressed like a clown. But noticeably, not the mom and the baby. They're never seen again. Mm-hmm. So we can only assume that they just got ate by the car. That's that. So the whale, Felix like laughs at the whale who's dressed like a clown, and the whale like kind of topples over trying to crush him. But then like he's like, oh, I need water. So now he's like a beached whale. So all the clowns look onto this unfortunate beached whale, who just tried to murder a baby and a mother. And they start weeping, and Felix is like, oh, I know what to do. He takes the clowns' outlines and then reforms them all like standing shoulder to foot, on top of each other. Felix climbs to the top.
He ties the string onto the whale and starts winching the whale up so that the whale can be above this glass of water.
Mm-hmm. It's framed as if it's like a pool of water, because you don't see it in comparison to everything else. You just see, the tub of water. But then when he starts dropping the whale, it's revealed that, oh no, it's just like a cup of water.
It's like subversion, expectation, and then it subverts again, because you see the big... You think of it as a big tub of water, and then they show it's a little cup, and you're like, oh, it's clowns. They're gonna do like, oh, he flops. This humongous whale's gonna flop into the little cup of water. He crushes the glass.
And he's like, that's refreshing.
Water.
And then I love the animation they do for Felix, like, climbing down from the clown pile. Like, they could have just had him climb down, but, like, no. Like in the previous short, he's, an ink blot cartoon character, so he just kind of turns to ink and he starts, like, sliding down all the clowns, like, inside of their clothes. And then he just kind of pops out, like, out of one of the clown's pants legs at the bottom.
And then, to bring it all the way back to the beginning, the vacuum cleaner's back, and he's walking through the desert that they're now in, because Felix has taken apart the entire town, essentially.
Yep.
And he goes, Felix, it's so good to see ya! Ah!
I'm so happy to see you. I could. And Felix is like, oh no, please don't. And then he just leans in to give Felix a big old smooch with his vacuum.
With his vacuum mouth.
And then he just starts vacuuming in Felix. And then, what was, then it's just like a weird, random background character that we haven't even seen until now just kind of pops up into the foreground and says like...
Isn't that precious?
And then the episode just, Iris is out. And then that's it. That's the first episode of the Twisted Tales of Felix. I'd probably give that like a solid 8.
I'd give it a 9, honestly.
I thought that was extremely entertaining. Just really good visual gags, really, entertaining premise. Great performance by Charlie Adler as the vacuum.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that sounds fair.
Yeah.
Okay, so Eagle, what are your overall thoughts? Your first impression of this first episode?
Honestly, I'm super down to watch more of this. Like, I have been trying to learn animation myself, and seeing all these creative ways of tackling, like, visual gags has been really interesting. We didn't talk about it, but there's one visual gag in the first episode when he's on the pirate ship. He looks over and sees the skeleton pirates for the first time, and he has kind of like a reaction. There's a shot of his reaction, and instead of just doing like the kind of gasp in horror, his whole mouth extends open, and you see Felix's skeleton screaming in fear.
Yup. And immediately I just think of the game over screen from that bootleg Russian Felix the Cat NES game, where he's just tearing his flesh off of his skull.
Ooh.
But yeah, like, there's a ton of little gags like this. Like, they never just have Felix do a reaction shot. They never just have Felix, climb down from something. They always find some, like, weird, inventive, creative way to convey it.
Felix doesn't have a lighter. He has his tail flick open and there's a flame on the end. Mm-hmm. Or he doesn't have a flashlight. He takes off his tail and boom, it's a flashlight now. Or he has the exclamation appear above his head and he grabs that and uses that as a telescope.
Yup. Again, it's like taking the internal logic of 30s rubber hose cartoons and presenting it, in a quote-unquote modern or, then modern setting. I absolutely dig this show. I think it's so weird to me that no one ever talks about this show, because for my money, it's one of the most inventive and entertaining cartoons to come out of the 90s. It's
probably, in my opinion, the best that Felix has, to his name.
I would 100% agree, because, let's be real here, Felix doesn't have a great track record.
No.
The early shorts, like the Otto Mesmer shorts, back in the black and white era, are, obviously of historical importance, and they're pretty entertaining for what they are. But, pretty much everything after that, once they added the Professor and Poindexter and Master Cylinder and all those weird side characters, it kind of got a little bit lost in the sauce. And, like we said, that's kind of when Felix got his bootleg Mickey Mouse voice. And just a lot of those shorts are really kind of cheap and not great.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was the first episode of the Twisted Tales of Felix. I'm really looking forward to watching more of this. And, we forgot to mention, in the theme song, I think you were very relieved, Eagle, when I said, because early on in the theme song, they show this, really kind of janky-looking, CG Felix.
Yeah.
It's like a really big CG Felix with a tiny CG Felix flying around him. And I'm like, oh, okay, the rest of the show doesn't look like this, I promise. And you were oh, that's good.
Because at first I was talking about, oh man, the animation style and the art direction looks really, really good. And then 3D Felix showed up and I went, oh no.
No. Yeah, mercifully, that's just for the intro. And actually, that's something they do in the movie, too, is that in the intro sequence, just for no reason, they have a CG Felix head just narrating. And there's no more CG in the rest of the movie. I guess, I don't know, Don Oriolo must have been oh, there's this new CG thing. I really want to test the waters with this, but he never really committed to it. And, honestly, for the better, because a CG Felix show would not have looked anywhere near as charming as this.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, I'm very, very, very much looking forward to watching through the rest of season 1 of this.
Oh, same here.
And the way the show is going to work is that, we're going to do more or less one season at a time, and then we'll switch over to a different show. We'll do an episode of Felix, then we'll do an episode of Code Lyoko, then an episode of Felix, then an episode of Code Lyoko, and then once we reach, the season finale of one of those shows, then they'll be replaced by a different show in the rotation. And, eventually we can obviously come back to, one of the old shows, let's say eventually we say, oh, I want to do season 2 of Felix, or I want to do season 2 of Code Lyoko. Then we can, pick that back up, and that can enter the rotation.
Yeah.
But thank you all very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this new little podcast experiment. I'm really looking forward to doing more of it. And I would like to give a sincere thanks to you, Eagle, for, agreeing to be the co-host.
Oh, of course. I'd like to give a sincere thanks to you for asking me to be your co-host.
So, look forward to episode 2, where we will be talking about Code Lyoko. Not episode 1, we're actually going to be talking about the 45-minute special, which you said they made in, season 3?
It was around about season 2, season 3. It was not to go on about Code Lyoko in our Felix the Cat episode, but
it's fine. We were telling them ahead of time so that they can, watch it before the episode.
Mm-hmm. It was the prequel episode to kind of ease you into what exactly is going to be happening in the first episode of the first season, because they just kind of drop you in season 1, episode 1. So we're starting off with a little bit of a starter.
Mm-hmm. And the episode, for anyone who does want to watch it, before episode 2 comes out, is called Xana Awakens. And it is available legally on YouTube. The actual animation studio has just put all the episodes up for anyone to watch.
Yep.
So you can, watch that before episode 2 comes out. And, Eagle, do you want to drop any plugs, any, places people can follow you?
I have a Twitter. You can find me at IamAnEaglet at twitter.com.
Mm-hmm. And likewise, you can follow me at VVorp at twitter.com. That's VVORP. And it should be said, and I'm sure most of the people listening to this are people who, already, at least initially, are people who already, kind of know us from Pencast or from what have you. But a lot of the stuff that we retweet is decidedly not safe for work. So if you are under 18, please do not follow us on Twitter. Like, it is very much 18 and up only.
We'll know. We'll find you.
Yeah, we will know. But yeah, thank you so much for listening to this episode, and we will see you, next week, or whenever episode 2 gets uploaded. See y'all later.
Bye-bye.